Good morning, everybody. We're just getting started and we'll jump into our agenda momentarily.
Okay, there we go. Hi, my
Good
God,
to see you, Carlos.
I am Sam. Hi, how you doing, Tom?
You know,
So good.
never better, never better.
Outstanding.
So
Good to see
yeah, likewise. That's that's the background that that was the panel that you guys were on at the presentation of the PR 100 study. Is that right?
It is. That was the final event that they had in Puerto Rico to present the final results, and I was asked to address the issue of workforce development, and I suspect you and I will talk a little bit about workforce. So I figured, let me go ahead and put that image back there.
I think it's absolutely appropriate. And one of the things that, when I was working with Invest Puerto Rico, that was our key focus in attracting businesses, but also, fundamental the attraction of businesses was the retention of existing ones, right? If you're Googling a market and you see that businesses are leaving, it makes it harder to make the case that it's a good place for new ones to establish. And one of the things that we were talking about with existing businesses, new business, other jurisdictions in the economic development world was one of the key challenges that they faced, in addition to energy, in addition to real estate, was always workforce. And workforce really became the king pillar for their capacity, because it might have the right tax jurisdiction, it might be beautiful, it might have the right real estate, but if you don't have the right people to do the work, then everything else seems to be moot. In a way that you can't just build a workforce in the same way that you can build a greenfield warehouse or manufacturing space. There's not a certain amount of capital that creates a labor force overnight in the same way that you can build a building. So it is one that requires far more significant strategery, so to speak. And you're exactly right. That's one of the core things that we're going to talk about today. We've got a couple of other areas of conversation on the agenda as well. And I've got my clock reads 6 after the hour, and I know that we've got a lot to cover. So I think we're going to go ahead and jump in.
Yeah.
I'm Sam Coleman, despite my label on Zoom. I'm Director of Energy Services with Green Power Technologies, Puerto Rico. We're a small hydro turbine developer for the island as well as the Caribbean and the rest of the U.S. market. This conversation, the Puerto Rico Energy Forum, is brought to you in part by Green Power Technologies Puerto Rico, but it's also brought to you in large part by Fundación Borencana. Tom King, who's the founding director, is my regular conversation partner, and he's not able to be here today. And so we are very happy to have Carlos Velazquez, the director and country manager for Puerto Rico and program director, I guess is your official title, for the
Right.
Interstate Renewable Energy Council, that has been engaged for a very long time in renewable energy around the country, but also particularly in Puerto Rico. And we're going to talk about a lot of their work. Carlos, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Absolutely, Sam. I much appreciate the invitation to talk about workforce and the different topics that are around energy, and as we project forward to move Puerto Rico towards 100% renewable energy. So looking forward to this conversation. You and I have had wonderful dialogues in the past, reflecting upon the progress that we've done, the things that we still have to do. So I look forward to expanding on that conversation.
Yeah, as do I. We're going to, before we get into that, I just want to talk about, excuse me, I'm getting over a bit of a head cold over the weekend, but we're going to get into a couple of things for general housekeeping purposes before we jump into our specific questions. Carlos, I almost called you Sam because it has my name next to your face, but I'm Sam. So that must still be a
I think that has to do, let me go ahead and rename it. I think that has to do with the fact that I'm using your link. Let me go ahead and change it. That I'm using your link to get in.
I think that's right.
Oh, there it is. It was simple.
So I want to share briefly. Easy.
Easy fix.
Let me quickly share my screen. Tom and I had talked about previously some of the key areas of focus for this forum, and I just want to reiterate some of that. The focus for this forum is to identify advanced energy investment opportunities in Puerto Rico by engaging with the thought leaders in a variety of different spaces. It is a community, which means we're really focusing on the interchange and exchange of ideas, and really, while not technology agnostic, we are broad thinking in terms of the energy diversification that the island needs, and really want to focus on what are the feasible options for local advancement. We want to promote successful projects. We want to provide news updates. We want to provide regular information regarding the regulatory and policy spaces, because a lot of that is quick paced and fast moving. And Carlos and I are going to talk about some of those areas as well. And very much explore what do we need? What are the gaps? How do we fill them? And focus on a combination of exciting opportunities, challenges, and try to be as honest brokers as possible with regards to how do we overcome the barriers that exist for projects to succeed in Puerto Rico, with really the goal to say, you cross the finish line. If you get across the finish line, we want you to be able to share how you do things that come after, and maybe that is you or your competitors. We are having we are looking to have members through this forum, whether you're an individual or you work for a company. We'd like to engage with you beyond just the general meeting, which is going to be open to the public, but there's also going to be additional supplementary material, and that material costs time and effort, and can would benefit from the support of the community, not only as active leadership in those areas, but also as an opportunity to promote your own work, as well as be involved in activities like steering committees, site visits, an annual conference, and other ad hoc events that we really think are important to understand as comprehensive a way as possible what's happening in energy in Puerto Rico. And so I will share this as part of the notes that come out after our meeting. This is our general monthly meeting that will be held every final Tuesday of the month at 11 a.m. And so thank you first and foremost for being here and participating in this, and great to see the folks on the line. The other thing I wanted to mention is we'll have a video from Tom that I'll show shortly. Tom had a series, if you know Tom, called Puerto Rico Energy in 60 Seconds. We're going to bring that back and show that here momentarily. Of course, Tom is an eloquent individual, and I don't think he's ever kept it to 60 seconds, but I think we're just over a minute for this upcoming video. But that's something that we want to bring back. We're also going to be having, as I mentioned, some supplementary activity. You'll see on there that second bullet, content battery hour. We're looking to launch that in this upcoming month. Battery hour is what we're calling Puerto Rico Energy Forum After Dark. So once the panels are done and the batteries kick in, we're going to have a more informal meeting. You're welcome to have a drink in hand, but we're also going to have a key guest, mostly from the reporting and journalism sphere. These folks are the ones that typically ask the questions. We want to pick their brains. And so that is something that we're planning for this upcoming month. We're looking at Bob Slavin from Bond Buyer to help us understand what's happening with PREPA's bankruptcy and debt restructuring procedures. We're looking at Nanda Singh from Energía Estratégica to help us understand what else is going on in Latin America and what Puerto Rico can learn and contribute to, learn from and contribute to the broader Latin American energy progress. We're looking at Sergio Marxwatch from the Center for New Economy and their recent report that just came out with regards to energy in Puerto Rico. We're trying to engage with as many interested and interesting people as we can to bring high quality content to you all. We're also going to be launching this upcoming month a power hour with Ron Leonard. And Ron, great to see you on the line. That is tentatively going to be next Tuesday, June 4th at 6 p.m. So stay tuned for the notes that come out after this meeting to join that conversation that Ron will lead. And Ron has a wealth of knowledge to share and a perspective, particularly from the New York State energy experience. So we're going to, and has been engaged with Puerto Rico for a long time. So that power hour will be with Ron. We're also working with our friends at ChatGPT to put together a comprehensive and accessible summary that for the Energy Bureau. What is happening in the Energy Bureau that we can provide as a comprehensive document. Angel Sayas made a point of that recommendation at last month's meeting, and we totally agreed that that'd be a point of significant value. The Energy Bureau, which we'll talk in length about today, is an area of optimism, but also huge tasks on their plate. And so understanding what's going on in their dockets is important to anybody engaged in energy in Puerto Rico, and we want to make sure that that information is easily accessible. So stay tuned for that. We're also playing with the idea of having a monthly cartoon and caption contest regarding energy, because at the end of the day, we want to be serious people who don't take themselves that seriously, and that is an opportunity to add some levity to the conversation. We will be jumping in here in a moment. I want to announce that tomorrow, many of you are already familiar with this, but Green Drinks on the west side will have Agustin Carbo. Braulio, good to have you on the line. He was your predecessor over at the Environmental Defense Fund and is now the DOE liaison for Puerto Rico, and Secretary Granholm's key person on the ground for all things energy in Puerto Rico. And so if you're able to be in Puerto Rico, if you're able to be on the west side of the island, Agustin Carbo is providing a meet and greet, talk, have a drink in your hand, but hear about what's going on with the DOE and energy. So I think with that, I'm going to show this brief video from Tom, and then Carlos, you and I will jump right in.
Sounds good. I like it.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry I'm not with you on the Puerto Rico Energy Forum call today, but I'm actually traveling from Europe to Miami for a board meeting. So I am incredibly thankful that Carlos Velazquez has joined as a co-host and interviewee. I hope he will come back and do this again with us many, many more times. But we also wanted to particularly focus on workforce, and that's one of the areas that Interstate Renewable Energy Council, and before that, the Solar Foundation, has placed a great deal of investment, and it's truer nowhere else than in Puerto Rico. We, as well as Fundación Borinquen, have several workforce programs, and the main one, of course, being the solar IT. I don't know if Valentina Garamendi, the program director, is on the call today, but we've asked her to join and participate a little bit if she can. But thanks, everybody. There'll be more coming up. We'll be putting out more information about memberships and new activities coming up. And I look forward to joining you again at the next meeting in June. All right, enjoy.
Thanks, Tom. All right, and we're going to
wonderful introduction by Tom. That was really nice. Thank you, much appreciated.
Yeah, and you know, this is this effort, the Puerto Rico Energy Forum, is something that has been running in some iteration for several years. And in my new role, Tom very much has, and his team, Javier Velez, Roth, who's on the line, and Lisbeth Garcia, have been a major help in making sure that this gets revived in a proper way. So let me say thank you to them. Carlos, I've got a couple of just simple questions for you. And I want to I'll reference back some of the work that you've been doing, but expand as you would like. Before my first question, if you have questions that you'd like us to take on board, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them as we can and towards the end of our conversation. So, Carlos, IREC published a solar workforce report in 2021, in which respondents cited three major needs for the solar industry to grow in Puerto Rico: transparency from PREPA, financing options, and better government policies. With that in mind, I mean, they cited 5 or 6 others, but those were the 3 heavy hitters. With that kind of framing the conversation, what is the state of the energy employment in Puerto Rico?
Sam, that question is a really good question, but it's a moving target, right? So we made projections about the workforce needs in Puerto Rico back in 2019 based on the tranches that have been approved by PREB to build out about 3,000 megawatts of utility scale solar across Puerto Rico, and about 1,500 megawatt hours of storage. And those projects really haven't taken off. So as I say, it's a moving target. It's a moving target because you make projections as to when you're going to be needing a particular workforce to be skilled and qualified, competent, and in quantity. But in reality, if the projects don't start materializing, then you have to shift over to understand what the new opportunities are. And here's what's happening. Some of the new opportunities are these, from our perspective. In 2000, let me sort of structure this in context. In 2020 or so, the co-ops, the savings and loan co-ops in Puerto Rico, Sam, probably made about 950 solar loans, mostly to residential sector, about 950. Last year, they climbed up to about 270% increase. They closed about 2,400 solar loans. So in 3 years, they've gone from 900 to about 2,400 solar loans. I think that's a really important space and opportunity for financial professionals in Puerto Rico to be a solar and renewable energy ready, and to have some familiarization with the concept and the products of renewable energy. And that's happening to some degree. So we do have to ramp up the number of qualified solar financing experts, underwriting, and that sort of thing. I think that's an important opportunity that we
Carlos,
have.
is that a reflection?
Go ahead.
Is that a reflection of just the growth of the industry, or any financial innovations or change of practices within those credit unions? I mean, there's, on one hand, we've seen probably a similar ramp up just with regards to the amount of interest, demand side interest of those products. Is there better agility on the supply side of providing them?
Well, I mean, remember, we're probably talking about 3,000 installations per month, right, that are going on amongst all the solar installation companies in Puerto Rico. Luckily, the local commercial banks and co-ops are participating in the long-term financing of that transition of solar in Puerto Rico and as such. We made, back in about 2020, we had some really in-depth conversations with the co-op sector in Puerto Rico, and we said, listen, the transition to 100% renewable energy is a 40 billion to 50 billion endeavor over the next 30 years. My question to the co-op industry is, do you want to participate in that financing transition, or you want to let other institutions that might not represent the needs of the communities they serve to be the ones financing? They bought our invitation, they bought our encouragement, and they have grown significantly from 900 loans to 2,400 loans, like I said, last year. So that's a huge victory. That's a huge success. Now I will say this: the Puerto Rican Green Energy Trust has identified a need for strengthening, if you will, that capacity of the co-op sector to participate in the financing. So they're actually creating a reserve fund, probably about $1 million or such, so that the co-ops can participate in a little more of a risk taking. That is, those who have less than stellar credit. Because at the end of the day, renewable energy sort of should be for everybody, whether you have a perfect credit score or you have good income or not. Electricity is a human right. The Puerto Rican Green Energy Trust is also participating in that transition to our benefit.
So I want to get to the Green Energy Trust in a moment, because I know that you've been engaged with Nelly Gorbea as well, and
I
it's
know.
one of the questions that I have with regards to where federal funds are going. We're going to get into that in 1 second. Sticking to the workforce theme, what are the specific skill sets that we need to achieve the energy transition? I mean, are these crew chiefs? Are these you mentioned financially adept folks in the credit unions? What are the skill sets that we need for the energy transition?
Yeah, sure. I did jump right into the financing, and I would say just to close out that one of the things that we did with some professionals from Vermont Law School that are experts on energy policy and from Perkins Coie legal firm. They've come to Puerto Rico twice now. They provided training to third-year law students at the University of Puerto Rico Law University on solar financing and solar development. So for the past 2 years, we've been creating a cadre of experts, future lawyers with a familiarization for the need of energy development and energy finance. Now, I stopped the issue of energy financing. Let's go back to the topics that you want me to address. No problem. I just wanted to make sure I got that in. Listen, man, it's no secret. It's no secret in Puerto Rico that as we're getting a ramp up of 3,000 projects per month, one of the issues that we have to worry about and ensure is quality assurance. We got to make sure that the installations are going on correctly, that the warranties, that the O&M is being done correctly. So one of the needs that has been identified both by the industry and the academia is quality assurance inspectors. We need to make sure that those engineers and those electricians who are experienced in installing are also experienced in inspecting for code compliance standards and that sort of thing. So in that realm, we have also trained 2 cohorts of experienced engineers and electricians to understand how to go about doing inspections. Third-party inspections. You want third-party objective folks to go out to installations and make sure that those installations are being done correctly. So that's a particular need that we're working on as well.
Is that something, will we, and I there's been I think the inspector side of it is one thing, the lawyer side of it is one element, the financial capacity and just the expertise within the financial institutions is part of it. Sure. Is the growth that we need to achieve, and now I'm exclusively on the workforce thing, are we able to meet those workforce needs with local talent? Is this going to require there's great efforts by folks like Comprometidos, who I think you are familiar with, to bring the diaspora back to the island. There's a huge wealth of technical expertise within the Puerto Rican community, but also from the Dominican Republic and non-Puerto Rican community that wants to be in Puerto Rico. How much of this need can we meet locally? How much of it do we potentially need to import from off island?
Let me start off by saying that I love the work that the women at Comprometidos are doing. I mean, the stuff that those women are doing is really good. They're reaching out to some of our best talents in the universities in the United States and telling them that there's a mission, right? There's a mission of Puerto Rico, transitioning Puerto Rico to 100% renewable energy, and there's space for them to make an impact over the next few generations. So I think that work is, I commend the effort that Comprometidos is doing. Listen, Sam, there's probably 12 sort of electrical sort of institutes in Puerto Rico, junior colleges and community colleges that are doing a good job of putting out a trained workforce of electricians, apprentices, and electrician assistants and that sort of thing. As you know, there's four or five universities that put out a very well-trained, competent, internationally recognized energy electricians from Puerto Rico as well. But I will say this: one of the things that we do need to do is to make sure that those who enter the solar industry at the lowest level, at the assistance level, at the assemblers level, have a career pathway. And they can remain in that industry whether they gain or not a degree in electrical engineering. We need people who are skilled. We need people who are experienced. We need, you know, family men and family women who've entered the industry at the lowest level and can find a road to move up in that industry and stay in the industry for the next, you know, for the next decades. The worst thing we can have is a high turnover of entry-level employees, because then installations are going to suffer, because maintenance of service is going to suffer, and you can't build a dependable electrical system based on that. So we need to create a pathway for these entry-level employees to stay in the industry, to gain experience, and to make a good income.
Yeah, and that
can we develop them here? Can we develop them here in Puerto Rico? Yes, we can. We're losing population. We still have 3.2 million folks. Yes, but I think it has to be a planned strategy. It can't be just by happen chance. There needs to be a planned strategy at the national level. And I'll just close out by this. At the national level, IREC is leading something called the National Workforce Alliance. National Workforce Alliance. The National Workforce Alliance in the United States brings together academia, solar industry, unions, potential prosumers, to have a dialogue to understand and identify what the skill sets are needed so that we can create a strategy from moving people from high school into those sort of skill training. We have made a similar recommendation for Puerto Rico a couple of times, and hopefully it is something that we'll get past.
I had a quick question. Is there an initiative being done with like on the workforce development side with trade schools and kind of, I think across the country, we are seeing some sort of stigmatization of trade schools, and right now in the country, we really do need more electricians. We need more trades, especially when it comes to workforce development and starting them out of high school or well in high school. I was wondering, are there initiatives or programs that are kind of taking the existing trade schools and kind of giving them rebranding or building out new trade schools within Puerto Rico?
Unfortunately, in Puerto Rico, there aren't. At the national level, like you well said, there are. In fact, IREC leads one of those efforts in the United States, but we haven't been able, we're a very, very small group in Puerto Rico from IREC, and we haven't been able to bring all the programs here to Puerto Rico. But I would say just in more general terms, the people who are engaged in transitioning Puerto Rico from fossil fuels to renewable energy are the heroes and sheroes of that transition, and we need to start treating them as such. We don't hear about those workers here in Puerto Rico like we hear in the United States. There's really awesome campaigns in the United States about those tradespeople, those electricians, and the hard work that they do, getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and making those installations. You don't see that sort of campaign in Puerto Rico, and we should see that. We should celebrate their sacrifice and the work that they do.
I think it's important to recognize also, Carlos, that you said something that piqued my interest, which is the lower level of the, you know, the entry level positions are the ones that have the highest turnover. And, you know, you mentioned that there's an out-migration challenge, and it's that specific rung of the ladder that is particularly drawn to, well, let me say this, they're the ones that are most likely to have a significant income gap between what they can earn in Puerto Rico and what they can earn in other markets, in Orlando, for instance, where there may be a similar boom. And so making sure, and Andrew, to your point, that there's a concerted effort, not necessarily to build new trade schools, but to enhance the existing ones to make sure that there's a funnel for those folks to go in there. It seems critical to the retention of that talent in the first place, to make sure that they can grow in the industry. Carlos, I want to, you know, get on to my next question, which is, will energy, just another easy one, will energy demand go up or down over the next 25 years?
So the projections over, not the projections, but the record over the last 10 or 12 years, the last time I checked, last year or so, what was that we were experiencing about a 1.2% decrease every year over the last 10 years or so, based on a couple of things, obviously based on decreasing population, based on more efficiency from appliances, based on more renewables going on rooftops. So I would say in the aggregate, it looks like, or record show, if you will, that we've dropped about 1%, 2% over the last 10 years. Whether it's going to go up, obviously has to do with the adoption of EVs, right? Of electric vehicles. So clearly, I mean, if you're gonna pump 17 kilowatts into a battery over a couple of hours, you know, for 100,000 vehicles, you should see a spike in demand. That's probable. How that actually washes out with more efficiency efforts that are going on, and with more renewable adoption, you know, we don't know what that's going to be like. But on the upside, EVs; on the downside, more efficiency and more renewables.
And going back to the workforce thing, if we have a continued trend in workforce challenges, you know, that has downward pressures as well for the energy demand, which is sort of the historical pattern that you were referencing.
But that does, listen, Sam, I would just say that does open up the door. Sometimes we talk about solar without efficiency, and those two things go really hand in hand. If you're going to do this right, you really have to look at efficiency first, and whether it's at a residential, commercial, industrial sector. And guess what happens when you do that? All of a sudden, you created a new skill set for professionals who can develop in the energy efficiency field, which is highly rewarding. To be a SEM, a certified energy manager, or certified energy auditor, those things pay quite well, and is very needed in Puerto Rico. There's but a handful of competent and certified SEMs and CEAs in Puerto Rico. So heck, bring them more.
Do you see a growth in ESCOs then, or folks that are providing energy savings agreements that say, look, there's 30% savings you can get out of this, and it costs you nothing upfront?
Yeah, we made, and I'm gonna be sort of blunt about this. We made solar sexy, but solar efficiency is like whatever, right? Nobody talks about that. So ESCOs have had sort of a hard time, in my sense, being able to make the business case to a lot of potential off-takers. My goodness, I've known that the University of Puerto Rico has had before them plenty of opportunities of ESCOs have come before them and say, hey, we can deliver 40% savings across the board energy efficiency. We get paid off the savings. And, you know, those things haven't materialized. Those things need to materialize at the pharmaceutical level, at government. And by the way, it doesn't help the fact that government doesn't pay for electricity for some of the municipal buildings and all that kind of stuff. It's not an incentive for them to become more energy efficient. That is something we should look at. I know that's a political minefield, but somebody's got to have the guts to do the right thing, right? If we want more energy conservation, more energy efficiency, people need to understand that that costs money. So, and that could save you money, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and going in, Puerto Rico 100 study that, is the, photo in your background, and thinking about energy rates over the course of the next 20, project energy demand as much as they project energy sales or electricity sales. That is a particularly interesting distinction, because the more standalone systems you have, if you have standalone, electric vehicle charging stations, it's not going to be reflected on the macro electricity sales graphic. So, do you anticipate that there's going to be more and more standalone systems, or even residential solar systems plus batteries that don't actually reflect any import sales from the grid? Or am I thinking about that chart incorrectly?
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. I would imagine, so the financial incentive is that if they tinker around with net metering, obviously, right, you do what you need to do and you get off the grid and you build your own system, right? Hopefully that's not what's going to happen. I think net metering is beneficial to everybody, even those who don't have solar, believe it or not, because it's improving the reliability of the grid across the board. And you can strategize and plan for distributed energy and storage penetration across different feeders in order to improve the reliability. So, and will I see more standalones? Only if net metering goes down, I would imagine.
And I've got a whole series of questions on net metering. So before we get there, just want to stay on the Inflation Reduction, or sorry, on the PR 100 study. Is and I know that you were very much engaged with the advisory group and very much engaged in the planning of and development of that report. So I want to give you a chance to expound on it in a moment. The conclusion I draw from that report is that 100% renewable energy is achievable at enormous costs and will depend heavily on 4 different options: rooftop solar, utility solar, 4-hour battery, and 6-hour battery. And when we look at and correct, respond in full to some of these the comments that I'm making. There seems to be a ton of excitement about other jurisdictions that have achieved significant production by renewables: Portugal, California, Washington, Oregon, Arizona, a lot of other places in the United States where you guys
Hawaii.
A Hawaii major presence. It's interesting to note that most of these places have significant baseload renewable and hydro. They also have a component of nuclear in some instances, and at the same time are paying some of the country's highest energy prices. Portugal's at 25 cents a kilowatt hour. California's closer to 30. How do we, Hawaii's closer to 50. How do we leverage that experience with the local idiosyncrasies with Puerto Rico, where obviously, I work for a hydro company. I'm bullish on hydro. Puerto Rico has a different hydro capacity than all of these other places. And so given what the projection is for those 4, again, they included wind and they included biogas and some other options in the mix, but primarily it seems to be those 4 options. 2 different types of solar installations and some storage. What's the right way to think about those projections for Puerto Rico and the models that we're looking at that in my mind look very different?
Wow, that's a complex question. You want me to go,
Carlos, these are easy.
That's that's pretty good. Listen, Sam, I like, me personally, if you ask me, I was just but one of 115 advisors in that thing, so I didn't have that much of a voice. I like pump hydro, right? Pump hydro makes a lot of sense if you can rally a country around a reasonable solution for a challenge. Pump hydro gets you about, I think the last time I checked, gets you about a 65% conversion efficiency, which is not bad. And for those who don't know what, I'm sure everybody here knows what pump hydro is, but you know, when you have excess energy on the grid, you use it to pump that water back to a higher level so that you can run it through the turbines when you need energy. And that water that you're running through those turbines at that particular point costs you zero. Literally, it costs you zero. And it is a very efficient manner to generate electricity when you need it. And it's great for base load, by the way, also. I would add that some years ago I did a back of the envelope study, and Puerto Rico receives something like 900 billion gallons of water a year from rainfall alone, using 35 inches as standard across the country. It goes up from 80 inches a year in El Yunque, whatever, Maricao, to 10 in Guanica or whatever. But as an average, about 35 inches a year. I think that's the number. So 900 billion gallons of water. There's a really good here opportunity to generate a lot more power based on water than we're using right now. First thing. Second thing is, the first study that was done in a comprehensive manner in Puerto Rico about how to get to close to 100% was done by university professors. I think it was Agustín Irizarry and company at Mayagüez, and a lot of their energy was based on hydro. A lot of it. As you know, we only have about 110 megawatts of installed capacity, I think, from PREPA, and only about 10 run on a really good day, because they haven't maintained it. So that's a huge opportunity to go from 110 to probably 500 megawatts that we can do in Puerto Rico. I really believe it. Now, we have to engage the population in a broader discussion about what that means on the landscape. And that's an important distinction, that what that means on the landscape. We may have to do some geoengineering, but guess what? We have to put it in context, and we have to be relative. Why? Either that, or we get 1 million lithium batteries on the island that at some point we're going to have to discard, and they have to go to a landfill, recycle, et cetera, et cetera. We need to make choices. There is no free lunch. There is no free lunch. If you're really going to be, I'm an environmental manager by training. That's what my master's degree is in. So I value and I focus in on environmental protection. And I look at different alternatives and different options, and I say, all right, 1 million lithium batteries, or make some geoengineering options about new hydro in Puerto Rico, et cetera. So those are discussions that we need to have. Those discussions weren't had at the PR 100. It's a broader issue. And I'm not knocking the PR 100. They did a great job, but now it's our turn. The good friends from the Department of Energy did their job. It's our job now, and we need to find ways to implement that. And that's going to be at the PREP, the Puerto Rico Energy Regulatory Board, with the IRP process and all that stuff. We need to bring up these issues and these choices that we need to make. And I'll stop there for a minute.
So
there's a lot more to say.
On that note, and you mentioned the Energy Bureau, so I want to bring up our next topic, which is something that is a hot piece of news these days in Puerto Rico, which is regarding net metering. And there's been a number of articles that have come out recently. Just yesterday, it was either yesterday or at the end of last week, we marked the 10-year anniversary of the publication or the enactment of Act 57, marking 10 years of official energy transformation in Puerto Rico. And so there's been a number of articles that have come out recently about the reflection of that last decade. How far have we come? What else needs to be happening? Is there optimism? Have we made as much progress, or how do we think about the lack of progress in certain areas? One of the common threads that I see throughout these articles is that what the one of the key pieces of progress that has been made is the creation of an independent regulator. And I think most people would agree. There was an article in the in Microjuris where Ángel Rivera de la Cruz argues, I certainly agree that the biggest achievement is the creation of the Energy Bureau. He cites specifically Article 6.3 in the Act, where the Bureau is tasked with two things: establishing rates and developing the IRP. Of course, there's a lot of players in both of those, and there's a lot newer players in the last couple of years with Luma Genera and PREPA's remanagement. So going back to net metering, the policy right now is caught in between the legislature, the Energy Bureau, the solar industry, the Fiscal Oversight Board, the governor's office. Like, there's a lot of different players that are interested in seeing some outcome from the net metering policy. I guess all of that is a prelude to the question of what's the right way to think about Act 10.
Listen, let me take a step back from your question of Act 10. And I have no problem with answering that one, but I think because there's a missed opportunity, I need to cover it. Listen, Sam, the missed opportunity here is we need to get the PREB, an independent regulatory board, to make a judgment, to make an evaluation about the value of net metering to Puerto Rican society, to the grid, whatever their charter calls for. But we need to hear the commissioners establish as a point of a regulatory matter the stability, the desirability, the value of net metering in Puerto Rico, so we can take it out of the hands of the political process. And fine, as a stopgap measure, we need to extend it to 2030. In fact, IREC signed on to the letter that CESA was promulgating around, and we did that with a lot of enthusiasm. But we think at the end of the day, the PREP needs to say net metering is good, net metering stays, and net metering stays because of A, B, and C, because it saves lives, stable, and it's an act of energy justice. What really, really upsets me about this argument of net metering, and it's happened in a lot of jurisdictions, is, and I'll say this without filter, you know, early adopters of renewable energy are rich folks with good salaries and good credit scores, like us that are here, right? And now all of a sudden, when renewable energy gets inexpensive enough for the working class to be able to have an option to adopt it, then all of a sudden we're going to minimize the value of net metering. So it doesn't make sense for the working class folks to have solar energy. That's pathetic. That is really pathetic, and that's unfortunate. And it's happened in a lot of jurisdictions. I certainly hope it doesn't happen in Puerto Rico, because at the end of the day, 45% of the population in Puerto Rico is LMI. It's not like Illinois, whatever, maybe 17, or New York and maybe 20, whatever. Here is 45%, man. We're talking about half of the population in Puerto Rico. So we can't stop the energy transition to 100% renewable energy at higher salary folks with good credit. And we need to make it affordable for all. Tinkering with net metering at this point would be a great injustice. So my encouragement is for the PREP to do their job, and I respect the work they do. I know they have a lot on their plate, on their docket, I guess would be the right word. But they need to make a value judgment and say what net metering's value is and stop it. And not stop it, continue it, but and stop the political argument and just get it going. And so
I've got
that law 10,
go ahead.
awesome. Yeah, law 10, great, wonderful. In lieu of a value judgment and evaluation from the PREP, I'm glad we did what we did. And I would say, listen, for the first time in history, there's 5 political parties now in Puerto Rico. I think for the first time in history, we've gotten unanimous support from all 5 ideologies or political parties in Puerto Rico for something. Law 10. To have an unelected body like the FOMB veto that's crazy. That's really, really undemocratic. So that's a non-starter, but I would rather have the PREP do their job. Does that make sense?
So it does, and there's, I think, a very long conversation to be had about Act 10 and how all those players shake out. That we don't necessarily have time for right now. I think it's going to be an ongoing conversation, and we'll see a lot more articles come out with regarding all these players, their different perspectives, and who, you know, I think it's worth mentioning as well that there's a primary coming up next month. Every elected official in Puerto Rico gets elected this November. And so there's a lot at play here, and there's a lot of positioning around what needs to happen, what should happen, what can happen, and who's ultimately in charge and able to be making those decisions. And I think that there's that's a complicated picture, to say the least. So, but I don't want to miss the opportunity to get into one last question, which is what's the most sustainable way to incorporate federal funds into our system overhaul? You have talked about the Green Trust very briefly. There's the Inflation Reduction Act, tax credits. There's CDBG funds. There's a ton of FEMA funds going into this. You know, one of the things that comes to mind, and we talk about sustainability from an ecological standpoint, but I'm with my economics training, I think of sustainability also from an economic standpoint, in making sure that the system that we build can sustain itself on the long term, because ultimately an impacts on ratepayers, on those LMI communities that you talked about, as well as just the, you know, the growth of the island. And we talked about migration, the ability to attract workforce, retain workforce. System sustainability means a lot for all of those task orders.
Sure.
Using and maybe just as an example, using federal funds to implement solutions. Does that concern you at all with regards to, you mentioned 1 million lithium ion batteries? If we pay for lithium ion batteries and they need to be replaced at some point, and we paid for them in day one with federal funds, who pays for them in stage 2? So what's the right way to sustainably leverage federal funds to roll out this overhaul that we're thinking of doing, so that it is self-sustaining, that can carry itself?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question, Sam, because at no point in history, in the past or in the future, Puerto Rico is ever going to get an injection of so much in terms of billions of dollars for the reconstruction of the electrical system in Puerto Rico, and we want to get it right. We want to get it sustainable. We want to get it renewable. We want to get it equitable. You're absolutely correct about all that. But I would say this: we have a very unique opportunity with the ITC electability pay provision. For the first time in history, Puerto Rico nonprofits, municipal governments, and other jurisdictions have an opportunity to leverage the tax credit via a fairly complex structure, but involving a mainland off-taker that conduits the funds for reducing and discounting the cost to the LMI communities in Puerto Rico. But it's a doable thing. We're doing it in an initiative called Consorcio, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But for the first time, not later, I mean, hopefully at another show. But for the first time, we'll be able to leverage the investment tax credit to reduce the cost of solar and storage or any renewable assets project in Puerto Rico. And I think that's important, because for the first time, you'll be able to reduce projects between 30% to up to 50% if it's a very low income community, that you have adders on top of the 30% to get to 50%. So that would be an act of great social justice in order to make solar and storage accessible to many of the communities that otherwise haven't had an opportunity to. So there are great opportunities out there. The Puerto Rico Green Energy Trust has to play a fundamental role in being an honest broker, in being an honest broker, and having a very open conversation with communities out there for them to identify what are the best options for those communities. And the best option for the communities may be some hydro, maybe some wind, maybe some solar, maybe community solar, maybe just for the critical loads in that community as a first step. It may be energy resilience planning with those who are bedridden as to the ones that you focus in first for putting solar and storage. The solutions are going to be different for every community. But we need to engage the communities in these plans as well.
I have lots of questions, Carlos, about what other innovations we'd like to see, we need, whether that's financial innovations, whether it's clean tech innovations on the technology side. I'd love to talk about the recently expanded Section 301 tariffs that just came that will come into effect later this year, and what those impacts are for the solar transition and the cost of some of the materials, and how do we grow domestic, not just in the U.S. but in Puerto Rico manufacturing sector for some of the clean energy technology that will be the cornerstone of the transition, right? Not just on the generation side, but on the storage side and on the efficiency side, the monitoring side, the nexus between energy and telecommunications, which I think is of critical import as well. I know that you've been engaged with the USDA's Rural Utility Service Office as well, just in terms of the rollout of PACE and some of other federal funds to make sure that all of these utilities really are interconnected. And as we're laying wires, let's think about how do we get smarter telecommunications backbones as well. But I think that we have hit our hour, and we'll have to continue the conversation at another time.
Sounds good.
I want to, Ron, I see your hands raised, so I'm gonna give you the floor here in 1 second. But before I do that, Carlos, thank you very much for your insight and your work. The last question I have for you is this: where can people follow your work, and how can people stay engaged with IREC?
Oh, wonderful. I really appreciate that question. Listen, we're LinkedIn. That's a place that you can find us under Carlos Alberto Velázquez, or under Interstate Renewable Energy Council. We have a page also. And in terms of the website, it is irecusa.org. irecusa.org.
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. We'll link to all of that in the notes that we send out, and I highly encourage you, if you're not already, to become a follower of the work that Carlos and his colleagues are doing. It's important, and it's raising some significant questions and providing significant answers to what's happening in the energy transition for Puerto Rico. So, Carlos, thank you again, and Ron, I'll give you the floor.
So if you look in the chat, you will notice a bunch of things I put in there. One of them has to do with my friend Mark Perez, who is an advocate for Puerto Rico and an advocate for energy in general. And what that means is he has come up, and this is now 7 years ago, with a breakthrough way of analyzing a grid. And by breakthrough, I mean 100% renewable energy. It's going to work. You have to do the actual study on the actual grid, and it's different than what DOE did. And he has successfully done this for the ISO, with the largest grid in the United States, just did Newfoundland, recently did Switzerland. This is really a breakthrough on how to show the economic way of achieving 100% renewable energy. And we hope to have an announcement about that whole study and a proposal in soon, maybe as soon as next week. So stay tuned for my Ron Leonard Power Hour, and maybe you'll hear some news.
Yeah, Ron, thank you very much. And I'll include the links that you sent in the chat, in the notes that we send out afterwards. If you're interested, I'll close with this, and then we'll let everybody get to lunch. If you're interested in sponsoring, becoming a member, engaging in a steering session, leading an issue conversation, if you're interested in us covering certain topics, if you'd like to lead those conversations, reach out to me. We want to make sure that we're living up to the name of the Puerto Rico Energy Forum and engaging with a wide variety of different ideas, and creating the platform for those to be exchanged. And so do not hesitate to reach out to me. Otherwise, if you're going to be in Aguadilla tomorrow at Set the Bar. Thanks, Braulio. If you're going to be at Set the Bar tomorrow in Aguadilla to hear Agustin Carbo, we'll see each other there. And I look forward to the conversation. Until next time, I think we'll leave it there. Carlos, thank you, sir. Have a great day,
Tremendo.
everybody.
Muchas gracias, Sam. Buenas tardes.